ChatGPT has got some really big strengths. And I think a couple of them are great for ideation or brainstorming, coming up with ideas. And it's great for research. And then when you put those two things together, I think the thing it's absolutely at its strongest, you can deliver so much value to a client coming up with that sort of analysis. What accountants must never, ever, ever do is give that report to the client. So you've got to keep learning. And so we have to stay ahead.
It seems everyone's talking about AI and ChatGPT. And while some people think it's a game changer for accounting, other people are saying it's all hype. It's not going to change business advice. Mark Wickersham, what is the verdict?
I think that ChatGPT has got some really big strengths. And I think a couple of them are it's great for ideation or brainstorming, coming up with ideas. And it's great for research. And then when you put those two things together, I think the thing it's absolutely at its strongest is coming up with strategy. I think it makes business advisory easier than ever before. I love it for that.
Mark, you mentioned brainstorming, you mentioned creation, you mentioned ideas. They're not normally things that would be in an accountant's toolbox, are they? Maybe I get the research bit, but they're not known for their innovation and creativity. So how is it helping?
That's a great question. It's because we all know in the profession, we've heard it over and over again. Paul Dunn was talking about it back in the 1990s in the boot camp. And we know that we need to be adding more value. We need to be doing business advisory. And I think one of the things that holds us back is a lack of confidence. And I think that's because we find it difficult. We worry that we're not able to help a client come up with strategies, ideas. And so we'd rather stick to adding up numbers. And I understand that, but that's where I think ChatGPT makes life so much easier for us.
That's an excellent point, because when we look at the agility of accountants, their ability to adopt, they're often laggards. They're a little bit behind the curve. You will hear a lot of accountants saying it's just a new shiny bullet. It's the next new thing. It's a fad. It will pass. But this thing's not going away, is it?
It's absolutely not going away. No. And it's gathering pace, getting better. It's getting better on a monthly basis. So that the things that these technologies can do is extraordinary.
So let's look at some of the pain points that accountants are facing with these. Many business advisors, and we are calling accountants trusted advisors now, aren't we? Business advisors. We know there's downward pressure on compliance fees. We know that historical focus has been less valued by clients, so they are turning to other revenue streams and more project and consultancy-based work. The problem has traditionally been they haven't known how to price it well, how to position it, how to sell it. You've done a lot of work on value pricing. That is definitely your legacy. But they're facing time constraints, workload challenges. What are the pain points that AI and ChatGPT addresses when delivering advisory services, which is what we're focusing on in this episode?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. And you've kind of touched on it. I think the time thing is a big thing. When I've worked with accountants now, as you know, I'm an accountant. I was in practice. I've been working with accountants, helping them since 2000. And I've talked a lot about doing business advisory. Probably the number one objection that I get from accountants is they say to me, Mark, I know I need to be doing this. I should be doing more business advisory with clients, creating more value, adding value, but I just don't have the time. I'm just really, really busy. And that is an issue I found that many firms are working crazy long hours. And there's a part of that you've touched on, getting away from AI for a second. It's because we're pricing too wrong. We're too cheap. And so we are running ourselves ragged, trying to take on as much work as possible just to make ends meet because our margins are tiny. So we need to fix the pricing side of things. But as far as the advisory itself is concerned, just focusing on that, getting back to that, is I think one of the things it helps to solve is that time issue, in as much as we can, if we're preparing for a meeting with a client, if we have got a meeting where we want to create some value in the meeting, we want to share with them some ideas, we want to share with them some possible strategies they could use, then ChatGPT gives us a really big shortcut that with next to no time. We can carry out detailed research. We can come out with great strategies in just minutes.
I'm reminded of when I met with an older accountant. I've ditched him now. I can say that quite politely, but my meeting with him would be once a year, and it would be, right, here's what you've done in the last year. And there was never any suggestions, any advice. But I just want to track back on the time thing. We've got tumble dryers now, Mark. We've got dishwashers. We've got all kinds of tech that help us in the kitchen, but we seem to be busier than ever in the kitchen. We've got more apps. We've got more software that help accountants that presumably are there to help us be more productive and help us do things quicker. Why are accountants under so much more time pressure than ever before? We hear of overwhelm all the time.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And the problem, the problem largely is it goes back to what I often talk about is pricing. It's we're pricing wrong. We're pricing too cheap.
It underpins everything, doesn't it? Really, it comes back to that.
It's I think it's the cause of every problem we have in an accounting firm. If we really drill every problem back, not being able to find the right people, not having time, all these problems are to do with pricing. And we need to fix that first, which is something that we struggle with in the profession. And because we're pricing low, we feel like we have to keep working harder and harder just to make ends meet. And yes, we've got all these technologies that come out that reduce the time to do something, but these technologies aren't new. We had, I remember, because I started in the practice back in the profession in the 1990s, or 1988 actually. And the firm I worked for, which was an 8-partner, multi-partner firm, didn't have a single computer. They had a word processing department. And so I've seen different technologies come in, like Excel and so on, and it doesn't change the issue. And a large part of that is because we're pricing based on the hour. That basically any innovations we do, any efficiencies, any systems we put in place in our business, if it condenses the time, that's great. But if we price based on that time, we've got to do some other work just to spend our time and get some bills out. So it really starts with pricing.
So we hear this phrase sometimes, a burning platform, which is a mandate for change, which forces action, something that's imminent, that if we don't do it, there's going to be impending doom. And we're starting to get that ChatGPT AI feeling here, that if business advisors don't adopt ChatGPT and tools like this, there are risks, there are setbacks, there are downsides here. So talk to us a little bit about those that they might be facing in staying relevant and maintaining a competitive edge.
Yeah, I think that, and we've discussed this before, Rob, on a previous session, that the world is changing so fast right now, and I've talked about how I think it won't be long before much of the compliance work as we know it today will disappear. AI is getting so sophisticated; it's going to do it for us. It's going to do the bookkeeping. It's going to reconcile the bank accounts on autopilot. Everything we've posted on autopilot,
and clients will know that, Mark, won't they?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that isn't going to be a role for accountants or bookkeepers. I think that there will be a role for us, and there'll be an element of compliance work we will be doing, but it's going to really start to become, firstly, it's going to be harder to price it because AI is doing much of the work. So we've got to differentiate ourselves in some different way to everybody else. And it's not going to fill up our time. So we've got to create more value. We've got to adapt. We've got to do something different. And I think that's the big risk. But if firms don't really get on board this AI, large language models, and also use it to do things like advisory to create more value, then they are at risk of getting left behind, not replaced by the AI. I think I've said before, Rob, AI is not going to replace us. It's how our competitors are going to use AI that's going to replace us. And there are some firms that are already making big changes with the way they use these tools and deliver more value.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm hearing some accountants shouting in my ear saying, look, double entry bookkeeping's been ever thus for thousands of years. And accounting has not really changed, and it won't ever really change. It is what it is. But the accounting function, even the finance function as we know it, has been shaped by technology before our very eyes. So the rule is changing and the skill sets we need are changing. Just for people that are new to the Accounting Influencers podcast, let's get a few key definitions so we know exactly what we're talking about here. So technically speaking, explain ChatGPT and AI in a way that accounting generalists could perhaps understand?
Yeah, because there are a lot of terms thrown around like LLM, GPT. So LLM stands for large language model. It's basically a form of AI, arguably the most powerful form of AI. Essentially, a large language model. It works on probabilities. It uses natural language. So we input natural language, what we write, and it'll come back to us in natural language, but it'll predict what is the most likely word in the sequence. So that's essentially what it does, a large language model. GPTs, which is obviously ChatGPT, it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Essentially, it's a specific type of large language model. So that's what we're talking about. And then we see all sorts of other terms thrown around like hallucination. And what that means in the AI world is that one of the problems of large language models, not just ChatGPT, but all of them, is they do hallucinate. What that means is that when it doesn't know the answer to something, then it'll make it up in a very convincing way. So if you hear of hallucination, that's what that means. Another phrase you'll hear is context window. And the context window is, think of it as the it's immediate memory. So when you're having a chat with a large language model, it has this context window, which is made up of tokens. And that means that it can only store a certain amount. So if you become a heavy user of ChatGPT with long chats, you'll find it starts forgetting things after a while. And we do need to be aware of that when we're interacting with it. So there are some of the terms, Rob. If there's any more you want me to talk about, happy to.
There is one more. We did an episode last time on prompt engineering, which was really, really useful. And it is a new skill set. I'm just thinking there are these terms out there that accountants almost need to learn a new vocabulary in staying relevant and staying current, because goodness me, the up and coming entrepreneurs out there, the young people coming through, the very digitally savvy, they will be asking accountants conversations and questions using these terms, and that accountant's got to be on the ball.
Absolutely. It's nothing new. I mean, it's happened. It's always, every time something new happens, for example, we're now used to social media, which has changed the world of marketing. And we're used to things like Google, which didn't exist when I started in the profession years ago. And so there's all these terms like SEO that we've had to come to grips with in marketing. So everything is changing. And I agree with AI, we have to learn these tools. We have to be aware of what the definitions are, what it all means.
Are there any faulty thinking out there, any assumptions that when it comes to AI and ChatGPT that it's going to take over the world and we're all going to be robots, or stupid thinking like that we could perhaps put people straight on?
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that. It's going to kill us.
You must hear them
That's
all.
the Terminator situation.
It's the
And
Matrix.
yeah, and I mean, there is a chance that all these worst case scenarios could potentially happen. But when you listen to the experts, the consensus is that a lot of this is unlikely to happen. Yes, there are all sorts of myths. I mean, for example, people talk a lot about, I hear a lot of people, particularly in the profession, saying, oh, we're not going to use ChatGPT because it gets things wrong, which I think is really interesting. Yes, it can sometimes get things wrong. And that's the hallucination issue is the main thing there, hallucination. But actually, it's got so much better in the last 12 months. And one of the things that OpenAI were fully aware of when this cropped up, it was a big thing in the summer of 2023 with an interesting legal case around hallucination. And one of the things that all the major companies like OpenAI have been working on is hallucination. So A, it's got better, but B, it also now will start to cite its sources. So if you're using it for research, it will give you the links to where it's got stuff, which I think is really, really useful to be able to double check. The other aspect of getting things wrong is we have to remember, of course, that ChatGPT and the other large language models are trained on a huge amount of data that's out there on the internet. And that was all created by humans. And one of the things we do know is that even if we do a Google search, we're not necessarily going to get the right answers. We're going to get sometimes people's opinions. And so, yes, it sometimes can get things wrong. And I think that's a good thing because that means it's not going to replace the accountant, the professional, the expert, because what we will do is we will use our expertise to look at what's coming out of it, and hopefully we'll do some sort of sanity check. We'll apply our expertise. We might do a few double checks to make sure that it is right.
I'm really glad you brought up that human element because we are emotional creatures. We are fragile creatures. We're prone to making mistakes. But in accounting, it's very binary. We are in the business of mitigating risk and not making mistakes. So it's crucial that we get this right and we treat ChatGPT with a little bit of respect, clearly, because not everything comes out as absolute fact. So we're focusing in this episode, Mark, on business advisory and how a tool like ChatGPT really helps the accountant move from that provider of compliance services to that advisor, that consultant, that coach, that mentor. If we're going through it as a newbie, if you like, we're taking some initial steps, we're dipping our toes in. How do we start?
Yeah, great question. A good place to start, I think, is just to play with it, just to experiment. Because for many people, when I've done webinars on ChatGPT, I find that the vast majority of the audience, when I run a poll, haven't even gotten an account yet. So the starting point is really just get an account and just play around with it. Just experiment with a few prompts, see what it can do. And then what I suggest in thinking about biz advisory and specifically, I'm a big fan of prompt templates. I'm a big fan of saving time by figuring out what will be a great prompt that we could then just reuse over and over again. And when we think of advisory, there's a lot of standard processes that we would go through when we're working with a client. There'll be a research phase, for example. There'll be coming up with strategies, for example, strategic thinking. And we can build prompts that we can start to use that will produce things like really help us with things like a SWOT analysis. I'm just doing some teaching right now for my audience on different business consulting models that we can use when we're doing advisory work. And there are dozens of consulting models. SWOT analysis is perhaps the first one that comes to our heads. The business model canvas, pest analysis or pestle is another version, the Porter's five forces. The list goes on and on and on. There are at least 20 different business consulting models. And every single one of those, we can start to create a series of prompts that can really help us to use those tools.
Our regular audience will know I'm not an accountant. I'm a part qualified accountant. I'm a former high school math teacher. Is it as simple as dropping some annual accounts and reports into ChatGPT, maybe anonymizing them and saying, come out with a strategy or an analysis or an agenda for a client advisory meeting on the back of this?
Definitely, that's one of the things that we could do. And it can do a pretty good job. ChatGPT is very good at analyzing data. It's one of its core strengths. And one of the things that we can do is we can upload files like CSV files, like Excel files. And so we can take financial data. We can take for example, a monthly profit and loss account for a business. And then we can drag it into ChatGPT and then we can ask it to analyze the data and give us some insights. Those insights might be, for example, can you summarize this data? Can you tell me if there's anything in this data that could give me cause for concern? Uh, and so it might pick up on things like, it looks like this is a seasonal business, or it looks like suddenly these costs have gone up significantly in the last 3 months. It'll pick up on things like that. And then we can ask questions like, so tell me, what possibilities are there for mitigating these issues? What can we do to protect the business, to improve the business in these areas? So yes, that's one thing we can definitely do with advisory. We can feed it financial data.
You talk a lot about prompt engineering and I guess garbage in, garbage out. If you can tee up ChatGPT, it is a really powerful machine on your side. So you talk initially about just getting an account. I'm just thinking about accountants that started to play with LinkedIn. They'd get a free account and they'd get used to it as a platform for networking. And then the question became, should I upgrade and get a premium account? Should I start paying for this? So once we've started to have a play, there are paid levels, aren't there, of ChatGPT? And I'm sure a lot of people in your ChatGPT Academy are asking that question, should I pay for it? So when you get more adept and you implemented it more, you move into that realm, don't you?
Yes. And I was up until, when was it? Up until April of 2024, I was strongly recommending people upgrade because there's so much more stuff that you could do. And then, of course, in May, you may remember, Rob, in May of 2024, OpenAI brought out their latest version, ChatGPT 4.0, and decided to make that available on the free account. And so actually you can do some extraordinary things with the free account. The big issue is the fact that there's a limited usage. Whereas if you then upgrade, you can use it. I'm finding that I haven't hit the limit yet, and I use it every single day. And it was frustrating when I was hitting limits. So I think it's still worth upgrading, I think. But to start with, there's still so many, when people are playing around, there is a lot of amazing things you can do just with a free account.
So in terms of advisory work, bringing it into our daily and weekly setup in our accounting firm, what do accountants need to know, have, or do specifically to make it work?
For advisor, I think that you've got to have, well, firstly, you've got to have some knowledge in advisory in the first place. You need to understand how to deliver advisory. So there's some knowledge there. Somebody said to me I ran a training session on doing business advisory, and someone said to me, if ChatGPT and other large language models can do all of this stuff, does that mean that the business owner doesn't need the accountant to do advisory? They can do it themselves. And the answer is no, because you have to know what questions to ask in the first place before you can use it for advisory in an effective way. So, for example, it's brilliant if you to use it for different business consulting models. I mentioned SWOT because everyone's heard of that. One of my favorites is the business model canvas. It's extraordinarily powerful. Most business owners have probably never heard of the business model canvas. And even if they had, they probably have no idea how to use it to build a strategy. And yet it's so powerful. So we have to learn some of the foundations first. What is business advisory? How do we do it? How do we come up with strategy? We have to learn some of the basics of that. But once we understand that, it then we can figure out, okay, so what are the things that we are going to ask ChatGPT to do for us? And so then we can ask it to build a business model canvas for a client. We can ask it to do a SWOT analysis for a client.
When you go to your academy students who've been with you for a long time, you've got a high level mentoring program, I know, that takes them through this. You'll have seen accounting firms that have truly integrated this well, the delivering advisory services, the pricing it really well. Share with us some best practices from that, our success stories, Mark, about what that looks like.
Yeah, I was talking to a while ago now. I was teaching how we can use ChatGPT to use the business model canvas, and how we can use it with just a handful of prompts, how we can use it to create a strategic plan for a business in a matter of less than an hour, that can amount to 50 or 80-page document. The sort of thing that a big consulting firm like McKinsey's, if they were to do that, they would probably charge six-figure sums, and it would take them several days of research to come up with a strategic document of that length. You can do that in less than an hour if you know the right questions to ask. And I was talking to an accountant I've known for years, a lovely guy called John Johnston, who's from Hertfordshire in the UK. And he was saying he just loves those series of prompts, and he was running it through lots of different clients, just putting the client's details in there. That could be something as simple as just, if you just feed it first, for context, feed it the client's website. And then you ask a series of questions like, build me a business model canvas. And it will do a really, really good job of doing that. And then you can ask follow-up questions like, how could I possibly improve my value proposition for this business? Questions like that. And it'll just come up with idea after idea, which is hugely powerful. You can deliver so much value to a client coming up with that sort of analysis. Although I will give one caveat, as one of the things I say is, yes, you can create 50, 80-page reports with hundreds of strategic ideas. What accountants must never, ever, ever do is give that report to the client, not until the work's finished. The value is not in the report. The value is in the conversation we have. We use ChatGPT to come up with the ideas and the reports to create our agenda. So we've got a ton of ideas that we can talk to the client about and work with them over a period of time. The value is in the conversations, not the report that we print off ChatGPT.
And is it best practice, Mark, to be transparent that you are using ChatGPT as an accounting professional?
That's an interesting question. No one's asked that before.
It sometimes comes up when you're outsourcing accounting work, and you say to the client, I'm outsourcing it and I'm marking up the outsourced hourly rate or something like that. Or sometimes accountants never bring it up. So it's perhaps an ethical question.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. It's a little bit like I think you just mentioned. I mean, if you are outsourcing your compliance work to India, it it's a similar sort of thing. As long as the value of the quality of what you do is sufficient. But equally, on the other hand, I don't think it's a problem either being open, honest, and say to the client that you use the latest technology and the AI to help you create even better value for the client. We turn it into a positive message, which is true. We are using these tools so that we can create more value.
Yeah, nicely put. So quick wins, simple applications, dipping our toes in. You've said have a play with it, but anything specifically they could try, have a go at, put in their mark that would give them some early wins?
Well, actually, assuming you're talking about the complete newbie, somebody who's perhaps not even got their account yet, and now they're inspired to go and open up an account with one of the large language models like
And
ChatGPT.
they want to cross the divide from compliance to business advice, and they want to use all the tools at their disposal.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would recommend people do is use it for some personal use first, because it's some really powerful things and really fun stuff you can do, and really useful, interesting stuff that you can do. Just to give you a couple of fun examples. So I was just the other day, I listen to music a lot. I love music. I was listening to a song and thinking, what on earth is that song all about? So I grabbed the lyrics and I ended up creating a template prompt. It's quite a long prompt, but I asked it to basically analyze the lyrics, tell me who the artist and the song was, but then go through and explain what the song's about, and pick out the key lines in it. And it was really fascinating reading it because I love music and lyrics and stuff. So that was fun. Another thing that's a fun thing that you can use it for is coming up with travel plans. If you're going to go somewhere on vacation, on holiday, then asking it to come up with a travel plan. It can do a really good job. You need to have the right prompt, but with the right prompt, you can create some great travel plans. So I always say to people who's a complete newbie, just play with it for some personal stuff and just get to feel the power of it and do some fun stuff. And then you'll start to, once you've done that a little bit, you'll start to be able to think, okay, there's some business cases here I could use it for. What would happen if I fed an anonymous profit and loss account in there and asked it some questions to look for example, I said earlier, are there any numbers here that might give me cause for concern? Or are there any numbers here that might not be correct? For example, just see what it comes up with. And you'll be surprised at some of the insights. Some things will be obvious, but there'll be other things that will come up with it. You'll thought, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought to look at that. I'll ask the question the client that question.
And I'm just thinking as we wrap up, Mark, how ChatGPT could be a time machine. If you want to be a really good business advisor, accounting professional, you will get to a certain point in 3 years, but focusing on your ChatGPT skills, your prompt engineering skills, having a play with it, you could get there in one. So it will definitely accelerate your progress as a business advisor. Any final words of advice for our accounting audience to enhance the skills and plug into the AI driven landscape of advisory?
Yeah, I think that my advice would be, this isn't going away. You said that, Rob, earlier. This isn't going away. So you've got to keep learning. And so we have to stay ahead. Keep learning. There are loads of great videos on YouTube. Most of my learning has been YouTube because certainly when it first came out, ChatGPT, nobody had courses on it. So go and check out YouTube channels. As you know, Rob, I have a YouTube channel. You've got this podcast as well. So that's the starting point. Keep learning. Go and check out YouTube's videos. Find people that you like to learn from. Then go along to perhaps some webinars to get some deeper stuff. I do webinars regularly on ChatGPT. And then when you're ready to find out more, dive into some courses on things like prompt engineering. I do courses for the accounting profession, but I know there are other courses out there that people do on things like prompt engineering, which are really good. It's how I've learned the stuff that I know.
And let's give you a mention, Mark. Your stuff is accounting related because this is the world that you live and breathe. If people want to find out more about what you're offering and plug into your academy, how can they reach out and find out?
So probably the best way is just find me on LinkedIn. Uh, Easy enough to find LinkedIn, and then just connect on LinkedIn, and then just say, I saw you on Rob's podcast on the accounting influencers, and I will respond with a list of all sorts of free resources I've got, some links to from some free resources. So just grab as much of my free stuff as possible. One day, if we get a chance to work together, that would be great. But just get the free stuff.
Terrific. Mark Wickersham, wonderful to dip our toes into the world of AI and ChatGPT with you on the Accounting Influencers podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.